Hi everyone, welcome. This is My Play Games and I am Maitre and I'm very passionate about tabletops and I am learning to be a better GM, a better player, and a better person, and I want to share with you some of the cool stuff that I've been learning. This is part of our Mindful Gaming series. Big part of mindfulness is intentionality and boundaries, which I've been doing a lot of learning about, and I've tried to share with you as well. Having your own boundaries, yes, but more importantly, letting other people have boundaries with you. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The easier it is for someone to say no to you, the more open they will be. Because they know the space that you've created is fundamentally a secure one where they will not have to overextend or overcommit themselves to make you happy and keep the relationship whole. If they can feel secure about that, they will feel better about being more open with you. Many people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I This is not about like whether that's the best way to kind of define the things and approach the ideas that we want to talk about, but it is probably the most well known. So I'm gonna use it as a touch point here. The reason that I have an issue with Maslow's hierarchy of needs is actually really well articulated in a video that I watched recently that I will link in the description below. And certainly, if you are interested in a more intellectual and academic analysis of that kind of thing, you should check out not just that video, but that creator as a whole. But like I said, it is something that most people know, so I think it's an easy touch point to use. So let's go ahead and use that. Like I said, many people are familiar with it. In the hierarchy of needs, he argued that your basic needs such as safety and belonging, self-esteem need to be satisfied to a reasonable and healthy degree before being able to even approach or fully realize your unique, creative, and humanitarian potential. What many people may not realize is that this is not a strict hierarchy, or that wasn't the focus and the goal of his work overall. And actually, he never, as far as I remember, like the research that I've done, he never actually represented his theory as a pyramid, which is how we know it today. What's more, self actualization is not correlated with age, education, race, ethnicity, college GPA, childhood income, and there are no gender differences to self actualization. There are certainly environmental barriers and causes to self actualization, and some environments can bring out the best or worst in us. Um, there's not a lot of actual sort of academic evidence that the characteristics of self actualization can only be achieved by a certain kind of person. Wanting to kind of go beyond self actualization, there's a phrase that I came across and that Maslow himself used. Not sure if he coined, so I'm staying away from saying that. But self transcendence, which not part of the original hierarchy, but it's basically a higher state in which people see beyond their own concerns and perspectives and achieving a state of feeling at one with the world and those in it. So self-actualization allows you some amount of reflection and understanding your own perspectives and your own needs. Transcendence allows you to move even past that. So, coming back to tabletops, you shouldn't be treating your games like a therapy session, even though the games themselves can feel therapeutic. ultimately, what we're going to talk about here is the ability to explore decisions and character behaviors in a somewhat safe space without really impacting people in the real world. Like, really. To that end, then I want to take this lens and talk about how engaging with sort of deeper character development can help you learn more about yourself as a person and get to that self-actualization point, and maybe even hopefully get beyond it, but at the very least try and get there. Very specifically, I want to talk about what you should and should not, more importantly, do when trying to achieve and trying to work towards this kind of self-discovery. The first thing, I want to reinforce the point that I just made. The game is not therapy. It can be therapeutic. You can get a lot out of it in a lot of different capacities, and it can be tempting to think of it as a kind of therapy, but it is. Players and the GM at the table are not therapists, or even if they are, professionally, that's not the space they are doing it at. It can be a tool that you use to feel really good about different things. And therapists themselves actually do use tabletops in some capacities. I found an interesting article about that, which I will link in the description box. But the game is not therapy, and it does not substitute any work that you might need to do with a professional. It can be therapeutic. It is therapeutic for a lot of people. Certainly it is for me. Again, not therapy. The second point I want to make, if you want to explore personal things in a game, they need to be inherently personal. They should be about self-exploration and journeys that you want to take as a person, as your character. Not things like, being a racist to get into the head of a bigot. Like, that's not what we're talking about. It's about self-exploration, not just character exploration, unless there have been very specific consent check. And with the understanding that you might get told no. Don't be racist or sexist in a game, especially if it's like just to see, because I cannot stress how bad of an idea this is. Hi, editing Maitreyi here. I wasn't able to articulate this during the original filming of the video, but fundamentally the problem is that for a lot of people at the table, things like racism and sexism and that kind of bigotry is not just a thought experiment. It is a lived reality that affects people's lives and dignities. So for it to be just like a fun little like gamified exploration that someone's doing is dismissive at best and kind of cruel and mean at worst. So yeah, that's what I was trying to say. To give you a personal anecdote, I have two characters, one that I'm playing in a game currently and one that I played in a game like a year and a half ago, both of which I have used as vehicles to take personal journeys with the character and sort of explore elements of myself. They didn't impact other characters in these kind of bigger institutional ways. Like, there was no bigotry tied to it. There was no othering tied to it. It was growth in a very specific way. With my previous character, it was kind of looking at my ability to empathize with people if I was to use that in a way that was manipulative and without ethics. What might that feel like? So I ended up playing this like really pretty awful character, honestly. She was a face character. She did the negotiations for the Shadowrun group and that we were part of, and effectively was just not a very nice person and very manipulative. And so that was an element of character exploration for me. And now, as I'm kind of there's two elements specifically that I am exploring with a character now in a game. One is that she as a character is very physical. Like, she uses her body a lot. She takes a lot of comfort in the abilities that she has, in the trainings that she's undergone, and her ability to do things with her body. I am going through a period where I'm dealing with some transformation about my own relationship with my body. So having this vehicle to explore some of these feelings in a in a safe space is really meaningful for me. Other element that I am working on is basically she's been kind of a lot of responsibility has kind of been foisted on her, and it's basically eldest immigrant daughter syndrome. And if any of you out there are eldest daughters, especially from immigrant families, you know exactly what I mean. So it's kind of exploring that as well, because I recently lost my dad. I've been dealing with a lot of transformation again, evolution in that area of my life. So it's interesting for me to have this space where again I can explore some of those feelings and explore some of those behaviors in a way that doesn't actually impact any real loved ones. Like, I can be dismissive without actually hurting my mother's feelings, and I can just kind of try on being callous in a way that I would never do in real life. And there is an element of catharsis to that, but also it lets me kind of see, like, well, what if I said no here when I say yes in real life? And that's like kind of when I say it needs to be inherently personal, that's what I mean. It's not, well, if I treat someone who is meant to be a like a servant class or a serving class, like if I treat them like shit, I just want to like see what it's like to be someone in power. Like, that's really shitty, and I hope I don't have to explain what the difference is, but very definitely there is a difference. This kind of takes me to the next one, which is, yes, it's a personal journey, but it needs to fit into the broader story. So, like, the rest of your party kind of has to be on board. Um, it's not the Maitreyi story, and it shouldn't be, and it can't be, and so it has to fit into the broader story. It can't only be about self-reflection and actualization. The next point I want to make is that when you do this, be clear that the character that you're playing is very different from you as an individual. The problem with self-inserting, more than what I've already talked about, is it makes it really difficult to do weird things, to like fatal things, to make big decisions about your character when the line between player behavior and character behavior is thinner and thinner. It makes it very difficult to play a game then. So play something very distinct from you, with certainly, elements of personality that you want to explore. That can be there, should be there for what we're talking about. But as a rule, the characters that I mentioned here are very different from who I am in real life. So it doesn't feel like a self-insert. All characters you make, narrative characters that have narrative element will inherently have a piece of you in them because they are a part of you and your creation. But when you are using games and characterization and character development as areas to do this kind of exploration, keep the self-insert to a minimum. Moving to the next point, not every game is going to give you this opportunity, nor should you be seeking it out. Let it come naturally. There's gonna be just some games that have that dynamic that allows you to do that, but you shouldn't be like planning for it from the outset. If it happens, and if it happens naturally, then awesome, and it's really great when it does happen. Next point is to be communicative. Tell your GM if you're looking to do a deep dive on your character. Talk to them about what areas you want to explore. Talk to fellow players about how this might manifest in play. There is a lot of the over communication is never wrong, but especially when you are dealing with real feelings and this kind of exploration of self. And the last point that I want to make, allow your evolution of characters to happen naturally. The character that I'm talking about today, Riston, she was meant to start out super hard, but that's not how she turned out. That's not how she turned out to be. After some time at the table, developing trust with the table and the GM, I was able to sort of get into her head more and take her in directions that I thought were interesting, with the consent of the table. But she didn't go where I expected her to go, but that's okay. When I say before, it needs to happen naturally. Again, allow the evolution of the characters to happen naturally. It should not be something you force. You seek it out, awesome. Like, I hope you get it. But like I said before, not every game is going to give you this opportunity, nor should it. That's pretty much all I have. I really just want to make the point that you need to be super careful and very intentional about doing this kind of exploration at the table. Trying to fix what you might consider personality effects in like a few weeks, a few months, without like actual therapy, but just like character choices in a game, specifically with like their relationships and their personalities and interactions with other characters in the world. While it can be really educational, it's ultimately not it's not the key way to work on yourself and to kind of develop things about yourself that you might want to develop. Think about therapy. If you're able to access it, you should. This is the work of years, not the work of individual sessions at a table. And I'll kind of go back to the first point I made, where games can certainly be therapeutic, but they are not therapy. It's not okay for anyone to treat them that way. Anyway, that's all I have. If you liked this video but you don't like notifications or subscriptions, I have backlog of stuff, and I put stuff out every Wednesday and every other Saturday. I've also started an audio-only podcast format because I've been told that works better for some folks. So all those links are in the description. Otherwise, thanks so much for hanging out, and come see me again soon. Bye.